This episode is brought to you by actnoweducation. Go to www.actnoweducation.com for free comprehensive educational resources and opportunities for active duty, veterans, military spouses, and children. Thank you for joining us today, folks. Today, our guest came to a fork in the road after being critically injured while serving in Afghanistan and decided to take the path of positivity, being an inspiration to his loved ones, and created a legacy of a can-do attitude and a never give up attitude. He decided the value of the bigger picture of his family over the here and now situation. I'm absolutely honored to have my guest today, who served as a former Navy cook turned Army EOD Tech, Mr. Aaron Hale. And for those of you listening, Aaron's Army occupation in EOD is considered one of the most dangerous occupations, especially in our current warfare. For anyone out there unfamiliar, the recent movie Hurt Locker was a job that Aaron performed while in the Army and was the job that was ultimately caused him to lose his eyesight and hearing from an IED blast while serving in Afghanistan. Aaron, I want to say thank you for joining us today.
KP, thank you so much for the invite. It's an honor to be here and talk to you and your audience.
So, Aaron, let's just get things started. In 1999, you joined the Navy as a cook. Can you tell me a little bit why you made that decision and what was your time like in the Navy?
Well, to tell you the truth, it wasn't one of those, I grew up knowing I'd be in the military, quite the opposite. For almost my entire life, up until about a month before I enlisted, I absolutely knew that I'd never be in the military. I didn't have much ambition for it. In fact, I didn't have much ambition for anything. You could describe me as the all-American slacker. I had just enough natural born talent and personality to get by without ever having to put in a whole lot of effort in anything. I was pretty athletic. I was pretty outgoing. Kind of the floater in school, from the jocks to the nerds and everywhere in between. And I was enjoying life, but I had no path, no goals. I didn't have a mission in life. And while I could get by up through high school on just that, once I got to college, it really caught up with me. I did all of the people, all the hard workers around me, my peers, quickly passed me by. And I soon found myself out of college, realizing that I wasn't ready. So I did absolutely abysmal grades, and it was kind of a mutual thing. I wasn't ready to be there, and college just didn't want me. So I decided I needed to find that path. I needed to set some goals and have a little ambition and work towards my future. So at the time, I've always been a cook. I always loved being in the kitchen, ever since I could reach over the counter. So I decided to be a cook in the Navy. I enlisted. I wanted to get the 4 years, the GI Bill, get out and go to culinary school so I could become a chef. Of course, along the way, I kind of fell in love with the service and stayed.
Yeah. So, at what point did you decide to go into EOD, and what were your first impressions of the Army?
Well, I'd been in the Navy for about 8 years. I spent 4 of those in Italy. Really loved it. I loved being a sailor out at sea. I mean, it was great. I got to tour around the Mediterranean on duty. We got to go hit all sorts of different foreign ports and explore and enjoy the cuisine and cultures and stuff like that. And then off duty, I would take my leave time and go travel to Paris and Munich and all over Europe. It was amazing, but it wasn't much of a hardship duty. And I really wasn't feeling fulfilled as career-wise. Personally, I was really enjoying being a sailor. I was enjoying my time. But in 2004, both wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were in full swing, and I was watching it on the ship on CNN. And there's just this pull. So after going back to the United States and being uh, stationed in Newport, Rhode Island, I volunteered to go to Afghanistan. And as a sailor, I ran an Army chow hall. And instead of cooking for the admiral and 35 of his staff, I was cooking for like 600 NATO troops. It's pretty cool. It was definitely a change of pace, but I was closer to feeling more fulfilled, having played a bigger part. And while I was there, I met some EOD technicians. These guys were doing preventive maintenance checks on all of their gear, and they had their bomb suits and the robots all laid out, and they were doing batteries and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. It was like a cool guy garage sale outside the truck. And I just took up a conversation with these guys, learned about the tight knit fraternity that EOD is, the technical aspect of the job, and just a very challenging job, of course, and the fact that they're first responders, lifesavers on the battlefield. So everything about it really turned me on. So as soon as I got back from deployment, my enlistment, my contract was up for the Navy. For various reasons, the Navy wouldn't approve my request to switch over to EOD. So I let my contract expire. I ceased being a sailor, hung up that uniform, and I went over to the Army recruiter, handed him my record, and said, I want to go EOD. And that was it. So from then on, I started training to become a soldier, and it wasn't quite like basic training. They sent me through a gentleman's course version of basic training for prior uh, service members, and it's all of the basics of basic training without the indoctrination, the yelling and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then right after that, I started at Army's Phase 1 in Redstone Arsenal, Huntsville, Alabama. And then for the main school, the joint school here at Eglin Air Force Base, which I live just down the road now. And it's about a year's worth of training to become an EOD technician. And it's just a probationary status. You really got to earn it once you get to your unit. And they say that the year of training is just to teach you how to learn how to be an EOD tech, learn the lingo, learn the basics of ordnance, which is really our bread and butter. IEDs have only been at the forefront of our mission for the last couple decades or so, but we were, the job was born in, many years ago overseas, and it was all about foreign munitions, learning how to defuse bombs that have landed and haven't detonated, and how to defuse them safely.
Mhm.
Every single thing about it is exciting, rewarding, and I love my job.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I was truly an ordnance officer, so I went through the ordnance Army training for the officers, so I know a lot about it. Actually, I didn't go through EOD myself, and ended up I ended up in a transportation platoon for my first platoon while I was in Iraq. So had to learn a whole new different skill set and adapt to that. But would you mind talking a little bit about your deployments and what they were like, and maybe go into some of the differences between what you saw uh, as far as the difference between Iraq and Afghanistan from your own perspectives?
Well, of course, my first appointment, I was still a Navy cook, and all I really saw was the inside of the fob. The interesting part of that was we were in a very remote location, so remote that the Taliban were like, you can keep it. And we had no trouble whatsoever the entire time we were there. The
Hmm.
only weapons that ever went off were on the training range and negligent discharges. So the great thing about it, besides the fact that there were no casualties whatsoever, was that because it was a kind of it was very close to Herat and the Italian command. We actually had 3 Italian platoons of special forces guys right on our fob. So I learned Italian when stationed in Italy, and I got to practice it in Afghanistan. It was pretty cool. Plus, you get to trade MREs for, they would always have espresso and
Oh, wow.
prosciutto and cheese they would bring from Herat. So
Nice.
there was a nice little black market going outside my the back door of my kid defect.
Yeah.
Anyways, I deployed twice as an EOD technician. So almost immediately after graduating EOD school, my company was sent to Iraq. And I, having switched over from the Navy, got to keep my rank. So I went from petty officer second class to sergeant. And the difficulty therein
Mm.
was that I was on a really fast track to becoming a team leader, because by the time you make staff sergeant, you're expected to be a team leader. The only problem there is that I had zero experience in EOD. So I had to learn really fast. And this was not just good for my own safety, but the safety of everybody around me, including especially my team. So I had to learn really fast, despite faster than my peers who would have had the time coming up through the ranks. So I was placed as a fourth man on a three-man team, and I got to Iraq. And we were on response, but soon after arriving there, I was taken from my team and put at what Task Force Troy, their counter explosives exploitation cell, which is pretty cool. It also, also called, also known as sexy, but it's one of the jobs for EOD on the battlefield is much like CSI. We do post-blast analysis and we collect evidence from the IEDs we render safe, and we send that up to higher. We do a triage on it where we'll separate all the components and send them off to chemical analysis, biometrics, electrical analysis, and so on. So I got placed in the triage section of the sexy cell. And my job was to receive evidence from the front lines, from other team leaders. And I would then categorize, photograph, measure, do all that kind of stuff. And then I would send it off to wherever it would need to be analyzed. So, tape and fingerprint and that kind of stuff will go off to biometrics, whereas any types of computers, switches or circuitry would go off to electrical analysis, that kind of stuff. And it was an incredible learning experience because I got to learn what happens to the evidence I would be collecting when I would take over a team myself. And I learned how they want it packaged. Some team leaders out there would just take coils of dead cord to put it in an evidence bag and send it up, when we would need maybe an inch worth of it for chemical analysis. All the rest just gets tossed and is just more of an explosive hazard in transit. It's that kind of stuff. And the evidence collected on the battlefield would go to Task Force Troy in JIDO, and then it would get split off, and the evidence, these storyboards that we would create from this would go to all of those alphabet soup, the ATF, FBI, CIA, DIA. So everything I put my hands on and everything we would do in that triage center would be seen by the world's, the US intelligence heads, to find these bomb makers, the bomb placers, the financiers, and try to get what we call left of the boom. If you think of a timeline, we're always trying to get left of the boom.
Right. Right. That's actually fascinating to think about, that much analysis goes into that. And what an amazing and fascinating position that you held, and a very important and integral position that you held as well. So can you take us back to the day when you lost your eyesight from that IED blast? Can you just explain to us what happened?
Sure. I was in Afghanistan for the second time, and this time as a team leader. My team had been working in a region of Kandahar called the Zaray district. And that's the birthplace of the Taliban. In fact, the Russians used to call it the heart of darkness. It was a very busy time for us because they didn't want to give it up. And my team was located with the 4-4 Cav Scouts out of Fort Riley. And we were in a little village called Sia Choi. And I asked a interpreter what Sia Choi meant. And he said, cemetery. And you put that all together, the heart of darkness, cemetery, I'm like, right, this is Tombstone. And it really felt like the Wild West of Afghanistan. Everywhere you placed your foot, you were afraid it was going to explode. We were running IEDs, almost the same thing all the time. A vegetable oil jug full of homemade explosive with a little pressure plate connected by lamp cord and a 9-volt battery, almost every single time. I mean, with rare exceptions, but that was what we were doing for 8 months straight. And then I got to spend 2 weeks of R&R back home before coming back and finishing out my year rotation in Afghanistan. And I got to see my son turn 1. I got to spend a whole Thanksgiving with my family and have a reunion, and it was a great last page in the photo album.
Right.
Then I got back to work, and it was just days after arriving back in Kandahar. I got in a convoy, jumped into a truck with my team, and we headed out back towards Sia Choi. And along the way, in a convoy, the convoy commander calls back and says, EOD, there's an IED up in the road ahead of us. Can you take care of it? I mean, we weren't even, I still had the luggage in the back of the truck. But time like the present, I got back to work. We threw the luggage off the robot, threw the robot out of the truck, and got to work. And what we found was exactly what you'd expect: was a pressure plate and a jug of HME. So the robot had separated the pressure plate, which is right on top, and it yanked out the wires, so essentially rendering it safe. And I wanted to get that evidence as safely as I could, but so I jumped out. The problem was the robot's pinchers, the arm wasn't strong enough to get the jug out of the hard packed earth. So I jumped out with my evidence kit and my metal detector, and I started making my way towards the IED. And about 20 or 30 meters from the original IED, there was a secondary device that hadn't been detected. That exploded, punted me into the air. I stayed conscious. I don't know how lucid I was, but I was conscious. I landed on my knees and elbows, and the lights had gone out. I thought my helmet had gotten pushed over my face. That's why I couldn't see. So I did the functions check first. I did the wiggle, the fingers and toes and all that. Everything seemed to be right where I left it. So I reached up to fix my helmet, just to find that the helmet was gone. And the very first thing, I kid you not, first thing I thought was, oh no, this is bad. The Army's going to want that bad. But that's how it happened. Then it was just my team coming in to pull me out, medics taking a look at me. Medevac chopper arrived in about 14 minutes, and I was on my way right back to Kandahar and then to Landstuhl. And within 48 hours, I was at Walter Reed.
Now, I also recall in another interview where you mentioned something that was a little bit awkward about how this specific IED was called in, that wasn't like other IEDs that have been reported, and it had something to do with the amount of civilians that happened to be in the area and how they kind of parted ways. Can you talk a little bit about that?
This is speculation on my part, of course, but would never trusted the ANP, the Afghan National Police, very much, because they like the service members in the military and the ANA, the Afghan National Army, they do the same thing. They will, recruit somebody, put them in uniform, train them up, and they may place them somewhere, anywhere in the country, right? Whereas
Right.
the AMP, usually they get that like blue gray uniform, become a police officer, and they stay right there in their own town.
Mm.
So their cousin may be a Taliban, or maybe they're Taliban, or it's really hard to trust those local yokels. Now, while don't get me wrong, many of them are terrific police officers
Right.
in their own right, but um, there are two ways that a um, an ANP officer lets us know about an IED. First way is they just kind of dig it up and maybe they rip it apart and then they walk it right up to our gate, our ECP, and say, "Hey, look what I found." Then we're just like, "Okay, set that down,
Right.
back away, we'll take care of it," right? And that's how they do it. They're like, "What? Look what I got."
Right.
And the other way is like they'll go, "There's a bomb over there,"
Mm.
and when they point at it, and then you look at it, and by the time you look back at them, they've disappeared. And that's shady to me because they're like, "I found this, I found it," you know. How they figured it, found it, or how who let them know about it, I don't know. So this was one of those times where they're like, "There's an IED over there," and there was like all these ANP standing around there just milling about, and I said to the Turk, find me their chief," and of course it's like the biggest dude, the fattest guy, and I have one of those little laser pointers. I said, "Point at the," I said, where is this IED?" And he points at his guy. "See my guys over there? Yeah, it's right there."
Mm.
"Okay. Would you tell them to get to a safe area? I'm about to go to work." And it was like ninja vanish. They disappeared. Usually when you tell an Afghan to back away because this could explode, they take about 3 steps away and then they take out their phone so they can get video of this really cool thing about to happen. But these guys disappeared. Like everybody knew what was going on. So it was kind of shady. I gave him my laser pointer. He put the dot right on the pressure plate. Said, "Okay, um, give me that thing back," and then I got to work. So the circumstances around it were kind of shady. There were people stepping all over that place. How come nobody stepped on that secondary device? Luck.
Right. Yeah.
So, but again, this is all speculation. It could have been lucky, and maybe they came by it in less than nefarious ways, but
Right.
it's all past tense now.
No, I totally understand. We had similar situations when we were in Iraq as well, as far as like the locals, being in certain spots and knowing where certain things were. So I understand what you're saying when you're talking about that specifically. And so after the incident, I understand that you taught at the EOD school and you've been in a number of physically challenging events since then, such as climbing a number of mountains, physical races, marathons. And you mentioned in another interview that you viewed this injury as an example of divine direction. So, can you tell us if there's anything that could help others better understand how they could develop a stronger or grittier mindset?
Well, you know, through all of this, I've learned one of the most important lessons is that we can't avoid hardship. It's going to come in one form or another. It's just how we look at it, how we approach it, and how we attack it. And I sat in the hospital at Walter Reed, and those demons would try to get in, the why me, the what if, and that's such a self-defeating thing to do because you just go in this spiral. And resilience is built up over time, and it's not just something that we will ourselves to do. we're not like a rubber band. You don't just like stretch and we come bounce back, right? For humans, every time you stress us, every time we endure these hardships, we get stronger. We get better. And things in this life don't just get easier. Hardships don't become easier. We just get better. So when I went blind, like those demons, I call the demons, the what ifs, the why me's, the sad thoughts, try to get in. And thank goodness for an incredible support system with my family, my military training, all of that. I turned it into, if I'm gonna, I just said to myself, if I'm gonna be a blind guy, I'm gonna be the best damn blind person I can be. And I started looking for ways to start doing what I'm already expected to do. I'm still a father, I'm still a son, I'm still a brother, and I'm still a soldier. I was still active duty at Walter Reed, so I have all these responsibilities, all these hats to wear. My life does not belong to me alone. So when you look at it, that it's an ethical. I see it as like an ethical imperative that I do and be the best me I can be, despite having endured this setback. So things are going to be harder. And I tell you what, run thing right now, and you know this, and all service members know, something being hard is never a good excuse for mission failure, right? So now I'm sitting there in the hospital and Walter Reed going, okay, I've decided I'm going to carry out my mission. I'm going to be the best dad I can. I'm going to be the best husband and son and brother. I'm going to be the best service member, like team member to fellow veterans, fellow service members. I can use this as to be an example, and what kind of example is up to me. So uh, I started, as soon as I started learning, I went after Walter Reed, I went to the Blind Rehabilitation Center in Augusta, Georgia, the VA hospital. I started learning how to be blind. You know, they teach you how to use the phone with the text to speech, the computers. I've got barcode scanners, all these other tools. The longest learning curve, the longest class there is the orientation and mobility, which is the cane. Just being able to move about with, navigating with the cane. And while I was there, as soon as I learned how to use my phone, I was on the internet searching blind plus outside, blind plus running, blind plus climbing, whatever it could do, so I could, get back into fitness. I could go out and then explore my world and travel and everything I love to do. And these names kept coming up. There's a guy, Eric Weinmayer, who this year is celebrating his 20th anniversary of becoming the first, and I think still the only blind person to climb Mount Everest. So I sought him out and I went climbing with him. And I joined an all wounded veteran team up an 18,000 foot peak in the Peruvian Andes, and with Eric leading the way. And I learned about a fellow Navy veteran, Lonnie Bedwell, who is the first blind veteran to kayak the entire Grand Canyon in a solo kayak.
Wow.
But these are amazing things. And if these guys can do these amazing feats, I can get my butt off of the sofa and not feel sorry about myself when I go do something. And I joined Lonnie and I went kayaking with him. I've been kayaking with him many times. I've gone skiing, cycling, mountain climbing, whitewater kayaking, and I started running. There's another blind veteran, Ivan Castro, who got his commission as a ranger after going blind. He stayed in active duty. He went to special operations recruiting branch at Fort Bragg. And he had a good long career, retired recently, I think with 29 years.
Wow.
And I had a conversation with him, and it's so funny because the conversation with Ivan is really like the Ivan show. But because he's even bigger talker than I am. But he said, he planted in my head that he said every year he makes it a point to run the Air Force Marathon, the Army 10 miler, and the Marine Corps Marathon. So I said, that's a great idea. I'll do that too. And I signed up for all three of those races. And somehow I got talked into two more marathons. And I was registered for five races, all within 4 months of each other, altogether for 4 months. And I hadn't yet run a 5K. Um, and this was between 2000, it was all 2014. And uh, even though my first marathon, the Air Force marathon, was not a very good showing, I didn't finish. The next three marathons all qualified for me for Boston, and in 2015, I ran the Boston Marathon.
Wow, just a marathon in itself for anyone is no joke. That 26 miles is incredible, and you're an absolute monster. Like your mindset is just incredible. And from what I understand, your troubles didn't just stop after you began learning to live again from being blind. I understand that the residual injuries from the IED also caused you to go deaf eventually. Can you explain a little bit to the folks listening what happened?
Yeah. Well, around the 2014, 2015 time, I was getting retired from the military. I become a speaker. I was doing all this adventure stuff, and um, about 2000 in 2015, um, I'd also gone on this first date, a week-long first date with a young lady that I'd known since we were both kids, Michaela. She was living in California, I'm in Florida, and we struck up this conversation. And um, we really just, it was just this was the first time we'd gone on a date. It was fantastic, but she had to get back to work after our week-long vacation date, and I had a speaking engagement to go to. But After I'd gotten back off my flight and I returned back home, I was on the phone with her, and I was feeling a bit funny. So I was getting these dizzy spells and feeling extremely fatigued. So I told her I'd hang up and I'll call her back later after a nap. Um, and then I woke up with this just piercing pain in my brain, in my head. It like like a headache, or it just doesn't do it justice. It was awful. Within moments, I knew I'd have to. I called 911. See, what had happened was the blast. Though I was virtually untouched from the neck down, uh, the bulk of the blast hit me right in the head. Like, that's a perfect place for one of us Hale boys, is because of the density of our skulls. But um, but what happened was, besides going blind and blowing out my eardrums, which kind of recovered, um, it also cracked of my skull in a few places within my sinuses. I was actually leaking spinal fluid for years. They patched it up the best they could. It's called an encephalocele, but it either reopened or hadn't been ever completely patched. And that's like a pathway out is also a pathway in. And meningitis had crept straight into my brain and was trying to kill me from the inside out. I called 911, and it was kind of funny. I was a little embarrassed. I called the operator, and the operator said, "State the nature of the emergency." And I said, "Ma'am, I've got a really bad headache." And uh, she said, "On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad's the pain?" I said, "Well, I've never felt a pain like this in my life, and I've literally been blown up before." And she said, "The ambulance is on its way." 4 days later, I came to. I wasn't lucid. Um, whether I mean, it had confused and knocked me out so bad that, 4 days straight I was fighting this bacteria. And in that time, Michaela jumped back on a plane from California back out here to Florida, and my mom had come down from Ohio, and my sister was on her way, and these ladies by my side. I learned that the bacteria or the heavy doses of antibiotics were going to steal what was left of my hearing that the bomb blast hadn't taken. And I actually asked the doctor, so wait a second, I'm going to be totally blind and totally deaf. So you're telling me I won't ever have to pretend to pay attention ever again? It's, with all the ladies in the room, that didn't go over well.
Oh man, I I I love how you found the humor in that, man. It's just it all ties back into your tough mindset. And many times in the military, we find humor in some of those dark situations, and it helps us get through those times. But I'm absolutely inspired by how tough you are, mentally and physically, taking an IED blast to the head, and then here you are today talking to me on this podcast. So I want to pivot forward, and I understand you and your wife Michaela now operate a chocolate business called Extraordinary Delights, otherwise known as EOD, which that business plays off of the acronym EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, which is a genius tie-in to your occupation in the Army. So, Aaron, can you explain to the audience how that business was born?
Yeah, the grammatical thing notwithstanding, yeah, EOD or Extraordinary Delights kind of started out of therapy for me. Yeah, it wasn't always, I'm nobody is, always like, suck it up and, bootstrap your way through it. There were there's always those times. And I, for like almost 4 years, I've been preaching this triumph through tragedy and strength through struggle and all that. And here I was, sitting at my breakfast counter, deaf and blind, and really feeling down on myself. And I was just thinking, why me again? When has one guy paid his dues? When has this soldier had his fair share? But then again, that's self-defeating. Where does that lead? Nowhere. So um, I first started to cooking again because it was a way for me to take my mind off of the situation. We were coming up on Thanksgiving, and like I lost my hearing about August, September, and um, the cochlear implants would take months and months, not just because I had to wait for the bacteria to clear, the infection to clear up. Then they would do the more damaged ear implant, let the site heal. Then they would have to do these tuning ins, the periodic tune-ups, so that my brain could learn how to hear, and they just tweak like the soundboard in here. And then they would do the other side. So it was a very, very long process. And for 6 months, I was totally trapped in my body. Oh yeah, I couldn't get messages in, I couldn't see, couldn't hear. Everything ended at the tips of my fingers. So, and I'd also lost my inner ear balance, the vestibular balance. So I couldn't even get on my treadmill without feeling like the thing was trying to get ripped out from under me. So I started cooking. Thanksgiving was coming, and I just decided, okay, enough of this, pity me thing. Sorry for my situation. We're going to make this feast, right? Huge, huge feast. We're going to invite the friends, the family. They're all coming from, there's going to be this big reunion. Thanksgiving has really become, and the holidays have really become very, very special to me. And they always have been, from that last photo to this 2015. And what happened was I just threw myself into the cooking process. I didn't even have time to think about what I'd lost or what was going on. And I started making all this, all the Thanksgiving stuff, the turkey and the hams and the vegetables, and try to make everything on the table as unhealthy as you possibly can. And I started making desserts like weeks in advance, right? And I was doing cakes and cookies and pies, and I started making batch after batch of fudge. After one was done, I'd slide it to the side. I started making another one. I was seasonings and nice. I was going to the liquor cabinet. I was like, this is awesome, and uh, I was having fun. In fact, Michaela noticed because Michaela moved in. She did not go back to Sacramento. She stayed right there with me through and nursed me back to health for the months and months. And she stayed. She hasn't gone back.
Mm.
Um, she noticed two things. One was that there was something on me that hadn't been there for 6 straight months, and that was a smile on my face. I was actually having a good time again, and I was taking the focus off of me. I was trying to do something I love for the people I love. And the other thing she noticed was that there was just so much fudge piling up that she started sneaking it out the front door. And I say sneaking, like you got to be real stealthy around a blind
Right.
deaf guy. But um, she started giving it away, and people started coming back and saying, "Hey, can we buy some of this from you?" And the capitalist in me just said, "Well, of course we may." And one thing turned into another, and Extraordinary Delights was born, or EODfudge.com.
Yeah, that's an absolutely amazing story. And wow, what's such a strong relationship and a strong wife that so many people, strive to have that type of relationship. She just dropped everything in California and moved out to Florida and nursed you back to health and stood by your side and helped you get this business off the ground. So can you just explain a little bit about what has been some of your biggest challenges being a veteran entrepreneur? And do you find success in having multiple streams of income with that?
Well, many of the challenges, besides the obvious, I can't see or hear very well, is that or to have the benefits of that, in fact, are that I have to find new and creative ways. I have to find new methods or tools or team members to do what would be my weakness. And the benefit of that, though, is that I gain these team members, these strategies. I find ways to automate or to delegate and improve on something that I would otherwise feel like doing all myself. So I
Right.
had to take the step beyond just the can-do attitude and doing everything myself, and just go right into becoming the leader, this business owner, and allowing myself to relinquish some of the control. So the challenge turned itself into a positive. As far as income streams, it's fantastic because uh, once we did the hard work of setting up the business, because it started with me just cooking at the stove, hours and hours, just making fudge, right? And we would pour them into the pans, would set them in the fridge or the freezer, we let them set. Michaela would be there cutting and wrapping and boxing. We actually bought a shrink wrap machine for the garage. So it's funny, I turned that thing into a gym, and there's the treadmill, the stationary bike, the rower, and a shrink wrap machine. And but we started selling right out of the house until demand grew to the point where we had to decide if you were going to go a couple of routes. We would go buy a brick and mortar and actually run a store, or we could go find a co-packer or a commercial food kitchen, like a contract kitchen, and they would do all the labor. And this is what we ultimately decided, is that I didn't want to build a job for ourselves and go checking in and running a register and that kind of thing. We didn't want to do that. So we hired a much larger candy company to make our recipes, and from time to time, we just order our own stuff and should make the quality assurance. We just have them send samples, and it's my fudge, but somebody else cooks it, somebody else packages it, somebody else ships it. And we get to spend the time with, this home kitchen is now the R&D lab. Now we spend time on marketing, and we have a TikTok show called Aaron Hale's Cook Without Looking. And we get to have the fun part of running a business. Well, the labor, granted, I still love to do the experimenting part of the cooking is the most fun, and that's turned out to be very rewarding.
Yeah, no, again, that cooking without looking, I saw a few of your videos and absolutely awesome, man. And every time I watch you on TikTok or I see your Instagram, sometimes you post those TikToks on Instagram, man, the stuff that you make is absolutely from a guy that doesn't know how to cook anything except boil eggs. Man, I definitely want to take advantage and order some of your chocolates for sure. And Aaron, you've overcome so much in your life and you have such a strong mentality. What advice would you give someone with uncertainty of their future or someone who's at a point in their life of feeling like their goals are out of reach?
Well, I'll tell you, everything in life, almost always mindset. A belief, these limited beliefs that something is out of reach or just too hard. And I found, uh, because I was forced to get started with that, but now it's the success, accepting the hardships, taking those challenges and turning them into opportunities. It is like a flywheel effect. It's hard to get started, but then success begets more success, and there's a compounding effect, really. So each time I find a new challenge and I push myself a little bit harder out of my comfort zone, I find it's easier and easier. It doesn't like and it's like I said before, it's not that the hardship gets easier. I just get better, and I get better at how I think about it. Things are still difficult, but now I know that each time I get to a top of a mountain, right, I can look back and go, that wasn't so bad.
Right.
Same thing with running a race, with kayaking, with starting a business, with all these other things. I know that once I get through the work, I can look back. I can remember. I can say that wasn't as bad as I thought, and I can move on to the next challenge. So it's all mindset.
Right. And speaking of mindset, when we spoke before, you mentioned a book called Relentless. Can you speak a little bit about that book and how that sort of inspired you and might have had a little bit to do with your perspectives overall?
What book was that?
Yeah, the book was called Relentless.
Limitless. Yes. I recently read this book, and it's pretty fantastic. It's a book by Jim Quick. I think he's got the podcast and even a movie called Limitless. And he, at a very young age, had a TBI in kindergarten or something, and from a very happy-go-lucky and intelligent kid became slow, kind of depressed, and had almost a learning disorder. So he had to learn an entire another way to learn. And he turned himself into one of the foremost masters of your brain. So he just goes through different types of great, like the top 10 list of brain foods, from blueberries and walnuts to avocados and salmon, leafy greens and all that kind of stuff, to proper sleep habits and study habits, and all sorts of things. And it's a fantastic book, and it definitely helps me out with I find when I'm reading this that some of the things I'm already doing, some things I already know, some of the things are new to me. But it's pretty cool how he ties everything into his lifelong love of uh, superheroes and comics. And he turned his um, his disability into a superpower. So it's a pretty good book, and I definitely recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'm definitely gonna look into it, and I'll be sure to post that in the show notes as well for anyone else that's interested out there. And for anyone out there who's interested, Aaron, who would like to connect with you either on your social media platforms or on your website or anything, can you talk about how they can get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Of course, the website is eodfudge.com, and you can connect through to us through the contact page there. I'm available for speaking, and of course, you can buy our delicious treats on eodfudge.com. Otherwise, you can catch us on social media at EOD Confections on all of the major social pages.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll make sure I put all those in the show notes as well. So anyone listening out there interested in connecting with Aaron, I will post all of his social media platforms in those show notes. So take a look at that and check out some of his interesting materials and content that he puts out there, because it's certainly very clever, very inspirational at the same time. And before we wrap up the show today, Aaron, I want to thank you for giving me your time today, and I just want to finish it out by asking, do you have anything else for the audience?
Just remind everybody what we've been talking about this entire time is that, look forward to the hardships. Don't, I forget who said it, but don't waste the pain. Use it. Use it as fuel. And we're going to have to endure some pain at times. You can either, uh, survive it, or you can use it to thrive. So don't waste the pain.
Absolutely amazing, Aaron. I really appreciate your time today and you sharing your story. And there's a few times when you were talking, I actually got a little lump in my throat, just thinking about how what you've been through, and what an amazing life that you've prepared and built for yourself overall, despite all the obstacles that you've had to overcome. So, with that being said, Aaron, thank you so much again for being on the show. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of your content. Anyone listening out there, please connect with Aaron. We're going to finish up the morning formation today. Aaron, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Again, it's been an honor and a privilege to be invited on.
Thank you so much. From the morning formation, this is KP with Aaron, and we're out. You've been listening to the Morning Formation Podcast. I hope that you found today's materials helpful and of value to your current situation. You can connect with me on Instagram at the_morning_formation_podcast, or you can connect with me at theformationpodcaster@gmail.com. I would also like to thank my partners at actnoweducation for their support. Authenticity, community, and trusted is what you can expect from all members of the Act Now education team. You can link up with them today and learn about some new free educational resources on their Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or at their website, actnoweducation.com. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again. Stay safe and stay motivated. Warriors, fall out.